how did you make that choice? Like you want to specialize in pelvic health.
So when we imagine our pelvic floor, think about it as if it's the base on which these organs are sitting. So our bladder, in females, the vagina and the uterus, and then the rectum. The other most common thing that we find is bladder leakage. So when people sneeze, laugh, cough, or if they're jumping, or if they have to just quickly run somewhere, if they have a little bit of bladder leakage, that's likely because there's nurses, there's doctors, teachers who can't go to the bathroom as often as one would want. They have structured breaks. These are not topics that were often talked about. They have bedwetting, they have trouble with bladder control, they have trouble with having regular bowel movements. A lot of young children
right now, but this is like a slow poison.
Right? Yes.
You have to be so aware and conscious about your body.
Yeah, love it. Love it. This is my favorite topic. Pooping is my favorite topic to talk about. A lot of our health markers, a lot of longevity markers depend on how good is your gut? What is the status of your gut health? So gut health has absolutely...
Even if like I am thinking if I were to build a custom house for myself, I would put an Indian toilet there.
100%. Or if they say they have pain with intimacy, when they're having intercourse, if there is any discomfort or pain, usually it's often dismissed as a hush-hush where they say, okay, don't talk about it. So anyone who has excessively painful periods, lots of cramping, debilitating cramps that they have to take time off from work, can't go to school, can't go to college, and they're sitting at home, that is a concern. That's a normal part of aging. That's a normal part of the transition of being a human. Similarly, menopause is a normal part of being a woman. So yes, men do have pelvic floor issues, and they have the same pelvic floor issues that women have.
I have a quick question for you. Have you ever laughed, sneezed, or lifted something and felt a little leak, or maybe experienced pain during intimacy and brushed it off as normal? Well, it's not. And today we will be talking about it. Hello and welcome back to the Neha Joke podcast. Today's guest is Rama Swami, a pelvic health physiotherapist, who's here to help us understand what our body is trying to tell us, especially the parts that we often ignore. This episode is for anyone with a pelvis. Yes, men too. Whether you're in postpartum, dealing with pain, or just curious about your body, you will walk away with clarity and confidence. So make sure to watch this episode till the end for truths and powerful reminders that your discomfort is not something you have to live with. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe as it really helps me keep these important conversations going. So without any further ado, let's dive right in with Rama Swami. Hello Rama, welcome to today's episode.
Thank you.
We'll start with your brief introduction, like how did your journey unfold up until here?
Okay. So I moved to Canada in 2012. And that was just a chance encounter.
Okay.
My husband and I, we were working in India. I grew up in India. All of my upbringing is from India.
Okay.
So I grew up in India and...
Where in India?
From Bombay.
From Bombay.
So we decided to move to Canada because there was an opportunity. We just wanted to try something new. And luckily, it was a quicker process. Just within a year, we got our permanent residency, and then we landed in Calgary. And ever since, this is home.
Right. It's been like a long time now.
It has. 13 years, yes.
Okay. So you were like a physiotherapist from Mumbai?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I finished my graduation in 2005, and I've been practicing as a physiotherapist since that time. When we moved to Canada, of course, there was a little bit of a break to get the licensing and the procedures done. But I was a practicing physiotherapist there, and maybe that taking the journey a little bit faster.
Right.
Yeah.
And how did you, like after coming here, once you did your licensing, how did you make that decision, or how did you make that choice? Like you want to specialize in pelvic health specifically?
Right. I'm glad you asked this question because I get asked this question often, but I'll give you the detailed response here this time. So initially, when I first graduated, I didn't even know what pelvic health was. I didn't even know that this is a specialty that one can pursue. But as I started to learn more about the field, that's when I decided this needs to be an avenue that I'm pursuing. So it's a deeply personal part, apart from being a professional journey. Growing up, I grew up in India, so there was a lot of context of how women's health was treated, conditions about women's health. When we think about everything that pelvic health is concerned about, things that I treat in the clinic include periods and pregnancy, postpartum,
Yeah.
women's health related issues. These are not topics that were often talked about.
Right.
So that was my context, that was the background. And I really came to know how impactful it is when I went through my own pregnancy, when I had my daughter. And to see the physical changes, to see the emotional impact of what happens when your own body goes through those changes, that's what tipped the scale. That made me pursue pelvic health.
Okay. So it is just after your pregnancy that you dove deep into pelvic health?
I did, yes. So it's
Okay.
been in the last 10 years that I've been specialized in pelvic health. Up until then, I was practicing as a physiotherapist. I would dip my toes a little bit in pelvic health.
Right.
But then after my daughter's birth, that sealed the deal. That was it. Yeah.
Right. So let's start with the basics. What is pelvic health?
Okay. So pelvic health essentially is a specialized stream of physiotherapy. Physiotherapists first need to undergo regular practice,
Right.
regular certification. And after having gained a certain amount of years in practice, you can then choose to specialize in different fields. And pelvic health specifically deals with everything in the pelvis. So bladder concerns, our gut issues, bowel concerns. In the female population, we also have uterus and vagina. So everything related to functioning of these organs is what pelvic health specializes in.
Okay, that's interesting. Some of the common issues, like mostly women will have related to pelvic health, is like bladder.
Right.
This can happen after pregnancy or during like old age, probably. So,
It's yes, it is. It's a common myth. It is
Yeah.
a misconception that it only shows up during pregnancy. It is very
Okay.
common. Yes,
Yeah.
pregnancy does bring it more front and center.
Okay.
But that's not the only time when women encounter these issues. In fact, bladder concerns can appear as young as in our pediatric population. So there is a stream of pelvic health that only treats pediatrics, because children undergo pelvic health issues. They have bedwetting, they have trouble with bladder control, they have trouble with having regular bowel movements. A lot of young children, they get constipated, and because of that, there is other bladder control issues. So pelvic health specializes in that section of population as well. So there is a pediatric arm to it. And also, as people grow, when someone goes through their hormonal shifts, especially when it comes to females, puberty, pregnancy, perimenopause, and menopause, these are 4 major milestones when there's a lot of hormonal shift. And every time there is a shift, there is an impact on the pelvic floor. So it's not just pregnancy or menopause. These are common, yes,
Right.
but those are not the only times when one would see those changes.
I think not many people talk about it. That's
Yes.
the problem, because we hear this so much, like, kids
Yes.
bedwetting, but no one ever talks about it in a technical term.
Right.
Like they are having pelvic issues. Oh, they are just bedwetting. Maybe
Yes.
there's so many reasons that could happen. Maybe you're young, obviously, to control your bladder issues.
Yes.
So the awareness is so limited.
It is. It truly is. And in fact, if I'm going to be honest, before I started my certification, I was in the same boat. I assumed that, oh, this is just a kid thing. How many kids do we know who wet their bed? And it's, they'll grow out of it. They just
Exactly.
have to reach a certain age. And then eventually they grow out of it, which fortunately most of them do. But not all of them grow out of it in the right way. Our body undergoes a lot of compensations. And they might not all be the right kind of habits. So bedwetting is a very common pediatric concern, which us as pelvic health physiotherapists, we come across quite often. Yeah.
Right. But apart from bladder issues,
Yeah.
What are some of the symptoms that one could look for to understand poor pelvic health, if they
Yes.
have it or not?
Oh, that's perfect. So if we look at pelvic floor in general, let me I'm going to go a little bit detailed in
Yeah,
terms
for
of the
sure.
technicalities of it. So when we imagine our pelvic floor, think about it as if it's the base on which these organs are sitting. So our bladder, in females, the vagina and the uterus, and then the rectum. These three organs, they are sitting on a base which is like a basket or which is like a hammock. And that base is what we call the pelvic floor, the base of muscles.
Okay.
And the main job of this pelvic floor is to, of course, support the organs, make sure that they're in place, they're not moving, they don't shift their position. The second job is to control their function. When we have to eliminate, when we have to empty, the muscle door should open so that we eliminate effectively. And when we don't need to eliminate, it should stay closed so we can have that control. So, whenever the functioning of these muscles goes a little bit wonky, that's when we see pelvic floor dysfunction. That's when people have symptoms. So, to bring that into real life in common terms, that was the technical explanation
Right.
of it. In everyday language, things like bladder control issues, which means going to the bathroom too frequently. If you're amongst a group of friends and everybody's sitting at the table, you're having fun at the restaurant, it's been about half an hour, 45 minutes, someone gets up and goes to the bathroom, comes back, has their food, again gets up after half an hour, 1 hour, goes to the bathroom. They're going more frequent, then that's a pelvic floor issue. If you're going less frequently, there are people, especially because of their professional challenges, there's nurses, there's doctors, teachers who can't go to the bathroom as often as one would want. They have structured breaks, they can only go then. So you end up going maybe 2 times in a day or 3 times in a day. That's not healthy either. So that's a pelvic floor symptom. If you're going too less or if you're going too more, that is again a concern. The other most common thing that we find is bladder leakage. So when people sneeze, laugh, cough,
Yeah.
or if they're jumping, or if they have to just quickly run somewhere, if they have a little bit of bladder leakage, that's likely because their pelvic floor isn't functioning as effectively.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the problem, like, I am a common human being, so
Yes.
I'm just trying to relate to
Right.
this. But person who goes too frequently, the problem is they don't take it too seriously. Oh,
True.
I'm drinking too much water. That's why
Right.
I'm going frequently. So
Yes.
they don't drink enough water.
Right.
People who are not going as much, they think I don't have enough water intake. So, or they are just totally ignorant. They don't even
Yes.
keep track of like how often I'm going to the washroom.
Yes.
So, what is ideal? First of
Right.
all, like, I want to understand that this is ideal. I'm not going too frequently,
Yes.
and I'm not going too lesser as well. Is there like a benchmark?
There is a benchmark. There is
Okay.
an ideal benchmark. And this is a very common question that we ask when somebody comes into the clinic. One of the things that we ask is, how frequent are you going to the bathroom? So, in a 24-hour span, including daytime and nighttime, in 24 hours, on an average, a person should go to the bathroom 6 to 8 times. That's how many times you should empty your bladder.
Okay.
If it is emptying maybe more than 10 times, then there is a condition called an overactive bladder where you're going too frequently, and that might be the culprit. That might be causing some trouble, that might be causing some concerns. If you go less than 4 times, that's too little. So your bladder isn't emptying effectively. Both of these scenarios, excessive or more frequent urination and not enough urination, have implications on how our kidneys function, have implication on other parts of the body, which we don't realize until it's too late or until these symptoms become severe, and then you end up in the doctor's office.
I might sound dramatic right now, but this is like a slow poison.
Right? Yes.
You have to be so aware and conscious about your body
Yes.
that it is so underrated. Like, you have to, make sure you are looking like how your body is functioning, how often you're doing this,
Yes.
that is your body in pain. most people are just so ignorant about their body. Is I think is the major
It is.
issue.
It truly is. It truly is. Because a lot of these things are background functions. These are not functions that we think about. Now, for example, if somebody asks, how many times do you breathe in a minute? We're not counting that.
No.
We take it for granted. These are background functions that happen. Digestion, it happens in the background.
Right.
We eat, we digest food, and that's it. It does its job.
Exactly.
We actively don't seek that. And bladder function is one of those background functions. I wouldn't say we need to obsess over it. We don't need to be hyper vigilant about it. But also at the same time, it's good to check once in a while just to make sure that you're doing the right thing, that your body is functioning optimally, just to keep healthy, just to stay fit and, be in a better status.
Right.
Yeah.
But whatever you explained will also depend on the amount of water intake that you're having in a day.
That is a myth.
No?
This is a myth. This is one of the most common myths that I encounter in the clinic. So when somebody comes in with bladder leakage, one of the most common things they say, oh, I stopped drinking water. I don't drink this much water before I'm going on a road trip. Or in the evening after 6 o'clock, I reduce the amount of fluid that I'm drinking because I don't want to wake up often in the night. I don't want to pee frequently. But that's counterintuitive. That's quite the opposite. Because when we drink water, whether we drink water or not, let's just assume an extreme scenario where someone is absolutely not drinking water. That's not possible, but just for the experiment, let's think about this scenario. If someone does not drink even a drop of water, their body would still produce urine, because urine is not produced just by the water we ingest. Urine is produced by the fruits that we eat, the bread that we eat, the food that we're eating.
Right.
All of our foods have water component in it. That water gets metabolized. Our kidneys, drain it, filter it, and urine will get produced whether we like it or not. Drinking less water keeps the urine very concentrated, keeps the urine very acidic. And sometimes it's the acidity which causes the problem. If our urine is way more acidic than what it needs to be, it leads to irritation in the bladder, which causes us to go more frequent. So if you're drinking less water, your bladder is going to make you go more often because your urine is very concentrated.
Wow.
So that's counterintuitive. That's the first instruction I tell people when they say, oh, I'm stopping liquids, I'm stopping my fluid intake, I don't drink enough water. We flip the narrative and say, okay, now start drinking more water. Let's see what happens. How does your body react? What does your bladder do? When you give it more fluid, how does it react and adjust to it? It's a part of bladder retraining.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is good to know because 99% of people
Yes.
are doing everything related to their bladder and urine and water. That's
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Like even like if they're going out, you don't drink water.
Right.
So many people, they don't drink water. Okay. So for example, I drink like a liter. I always have a liter.
Okay.
1 liter to a bottle, right?
Right.
And I drink 3 of those in the day.
Lovely. Perfect.
When people see me carrying my bottle everywhere, they're like, that is probably how much I drink in more than a day, like 2 days.
Yes.
Something like that. Because if I drink that, I don't have enough time to go to the washroom.
Yes.
And I don't go that often.
Right.
Like I always like, I'm convincing people, no, you should drink water.
For sure.
As you increase your intake, your bladder's capacity to hold the water also goes up. It is like
does.
you have to train your body that way.
100%.
It didn't come to me naturally.
Yes.
But now you're saying that's not how it is.
No, it is. It truly is. So when you drink more water, automatically your bladder stretches because it's like a balloon.
Exactly.
It totally works like a balloon.
Yeah.
It stretches in capacity if you're drinking more fluids or if you're drinking more water. It trains itself to hold better. Now, that situation, whether or not someone is able to prevent leakage or if somebody already has bladder leakage and you're asking them to increase fluid intake or water intake, another factor that decides whether or not they can hold their urine is if they have strong enough muscles that can block the bladder from leaking. Because when we increase the capacity of the bladder, that's just the balloon that's increasing in size. But if the opening where pee comes from, if that is not clamped tight, if that is not held tight, then they're going to have involuntary leakage. So
Right.
it's a combination. So you're not doing anything wrong by adding more water. In fact, that is recommended. We
Right.
should be adding water. At the same time, we should also look at the patency, at the strength on their pelvic floor to see, is the pelvic floor capable enough that it can support that stretching of the bladder.
Okay. This is such a vast topic.
Yes.
So let's now like talk about usually after pregnancy,
Yeah.
your pelvic health takes a hit.
Right.
Most of my friends, like, now like we are in that age group where
Yes.
most of the women's we have had our kids.
Right.
And one of my friends, like even she had after her baby, she's quite active. So she also had this bladder leak issues.
Right.
So everything is okay. Once in a while,
Right.
like when she laughs hard,
Right.
she can leak.
Right.
Or like if she's skipping, she can't skip because she'll leak.
Right.
How does this happen?
Yes.
What can we do about it?
Absolutely. So, and this is a very common concern. Pregnancy related complications or pregnancy related impacts on the pelvic floor are very, very common. Sometimes they appear during pregnancy when we are pregnant and we undergo first, second, third trimester. Sometimes the bladder leak happens at that point. It begins then. In other instances, it probably might show up postpartum. After delivery, it might show up postpartum. So, effectively, what happens? When we are pregnant, the weight of the uterus, the weight that the baby is carrying, that stretches our muscles, which are the pelvic floor muscles. And their main job was to support. So if something is stretching that hammock of muscles and all of a sudden delivery happens, baby is now out of the body, there is something that needs to be done to bring the tone of the muscles back. The tone of the muscle doesn't automatically come back on its own. It resolves, it does resolve, but it might not go back to its pre-pregnancy status just by itself. And this is where a lot of postpartum bladder leakage comes into the picture, because it's believed, a lot of us have heard women talk about and discuss bladder leakage, and they say, oh, it's after childbirth. Of course, it's common. Yes, you've had 2 kids, you've had 3 kids. So yes, you're going to leak a little bit when you laugh, cough, or sneeze. Either wear a pad or just, manage around it. You know, don't skip. If you're leaking when you skip, then just give up on that activity. Don't do that. And that is a misconception. That is something that we have to discuss. We have to change, because it's easily reversible. It's not something which takes years at end to fix. Within a few months, people will start noticing changes if they know what to do. What are the techniques and what is causing that situation?
Okay. So apart from Kegels,
Yes.
because Kegels is the most popular one.
Yes.
What are some of the exercises that one could, like obviously it could be subjective,
Right.
depending on how worse or
Yes.
good the condition is.
Yes.
But what are some of the common exercises and how difficult is it?
Yeah.
I'm trying to ask from a point of view, like nowadays women are so busy. They are
Right.
doing everything on the
Yes.
planet. They have to manage house, outside work.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to give them a hope that you can sit and do exercises. Are there something like that?
Yes.
Or you have to go to the clinic with a physiotherapist and do it there? How does it work?
Certainly, certainly. And to answer your question, yes, all of the above is possible. Initially, when we think about whether or not Kegels would be effective, it is a very controversial, hot topic now, especially with social media. There is one group that absolutely supports Kegels and says, yes, everyone should do it and it's a good idea. On the other side, the pendulum has swung in the opposite direction and they say, don't do Kegels. Kegels is not for everyone. You shouldn't be doing it. I think I'm more in the center. I would like to strike that balance because there's benefits in both. There is scientific basis in doing Kegels and not doing Kegels. It's about understanding who is the exercise prescribed for. For example, when we look at postpartum weakness, when we are looking at our pelvic floor muscles, when the muscle gets stretched, when it is overly stretched and lengthened, of course it's weak. There is weakness in that muscle.
Yeah.
And Kegel is essentially a strengthening exercise. So for a weak muscle, yes, you want to strengthen it. Of course, Kegels would be a really good option in that scenario. But where the narrative gets misconstrued or where there is that misrepresentation is when Kegels gets prescribed for everyone as a blanket statement. That is what I have a problem with. Kegels is not the answer for everyone, because anyone who has leakage doesn't have leakage only because their muscles are weak. Bladder leakage can also happen when the muscles are too tight.
Oh.
If the bladder weakness has been going on for a few months, or it has been a couple of years that the bladder has been leaking, our body inherently has some compensatory mechanisms. The pelvic muscles decide to try their hardest to keep the tension going. So sometimes some individuals might have more tense muscles or extra tight muscles when the tension is more. And in that population, if Kegels are prescribed, it would make the situation worse. And that's when people say, oh, I've done Kegels. I do 50 Kegels. I do 200 Kegels a day, and it doesn't help. Of course, it wouldn't help, because that's not the right answer for that individual. So I think the first step is to find out whether the person has muscles that are weak, and that's what is causing their pelvic floor discomfort and bladder leakage, or are the person's symptoms coming because they are having too much tension in the muscle. When they have excessive tension, we need to work on flexibility. We need to do the reverse of Kegels. We need to have more flexibility training. We need to learn to relax the muscle rather than clench and strengthen the muscle.
And you would only know when you visit a physiotherapist.
The best way, the gold standard to examine and to find out is through a physical exam. That's not the only way, though. There are avenues, especially with COVID. We had to be innovative. We had to come up with options, because a lot of our patients were getting consultations through telehealth. And through telehealth, we really can't do a physical exam in that scenario. So there are ways to find out whether or not somebody has excessively tight muscles or do they have weak muscles. And physical exam is the best way to find out. So if someone has access to a pelvic health physiotherapist, I think that would be the best starting point. But that doesn't need to be the only way. They don't need to wait to get a physical exam. They can start to find out those answers and then figure it out.
Right. But like having a weak pelvic floor, like let's say you delivered, you're having a weak pelvic floor, will it affect if you get pregnant second time? Is it going to get worse? How do you navigate that?
Right.
Like, you should be fixing it first before doing it the second time?
Ideally, yes.
Yeah.
Ideally, yes. Because as I said, for the weakness to resolve, for the tone of the muscle to come back, it takes a few months, somewhere between 4 to 6 months on an average. That's a realistic time frame when everything tones back. Our core muscles, abdomen muscles, pelvic floor muscles, they take about that long to come back after pregnancy. So before starting the second pregnancy, the ideal gap, which we have learned in our textbooks, is have about 18 months gap between two kids. So the gap of 18 months is given to the body so that it can recover, it can rehab and strengthen back again to keep yourself fit enough that you can endure the second pregnancy. Having said that, it doesn't mean every second pregnancy will make it worse. That doesn't necessarily mean that way. But your chances of having a better outcome are definitely possible.
Okay. But is it any different in normal pregnancy, the vaginal birth, and the C-section? Does it make a difference?
Technically, no, it doesn't make a difference. And that is a common misconception that a lot of pregnant individuals have. They feel like if they had a cesarean section, then they've somehow saved their pelvic floor and it's okay. And they don't need any pelvic health rehab, or they don't need to check their pelvic floor. But that isn't true. Regardless of the mode of delivery, your pelvic floor still gets affected because you're enduring those 9 months or those 40 weeks of having that weight moving around with the weight of the baby, weight of the growing uterus, which stretches and which lengthens the pelvic floor. After that, when delivery happens, there is a hormonal influence because every postpartum hormonal change is the same when it comes to vaginal deliveries or a C-section delivery. So the influence of those hormones also make the ligaments, the muscles a little bit more weaker, a little bit lax. So looking at the strength in the pelvic muscles after a C-section is also relevant. Just because someone had a C-section doesn't mean that they're off the hook.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this pelvic floor strengthening, exercising, and taking care of it should be a part of your postpartum, no matter what.
No matter what.
Even if
Absolutely.
it's weak or strengthened, you have to like examine, make sure it's doing its own thing,
Yes.
right? It should be part
Absolutely.
of your regime.
Absolutely. In fact, I would very, very loudly advocate that not just postpartum, but it is relevant that every female who's pregnant goes to see a pelvic physiotherapist before she delivers, because there is birth training that happens. There are discussions around what would be the ideal position to give birth in, given your particular pelvis, given how are you breathing, how are you moving, what does your back feel like, what do your hips feel like. How do you minimize the chances of perineal tearing? Because with vaginal birth, one of the biggest fears that women have is about around perineal tearing.
Yeah.
So we can minimize the risk of all of these complications, or minimize the chances of having perineal tears, if we know the right strategy. And that is what happens in our birth consultation. So when we do prenatal pelvic floor physiotherapy, there are a few handful of sessions where we talk about the baseline status. It gives the person a good understanding of where on the spectrum is their pelvic floor. Is it weak? Is it stretched? Or is it right in the middle, perfectly neutral, very flexible? Or is the person holding more tension already? Because the outcomes of birth on each of those scenarios would be very different. Somebody who has a weaker pelvic floor during pregnancy that is already stretched puts themselves at a risk of prolapse, where the pressure, the pushing force might move the organs. The bladder might not come back to its position. The uterus might not stay in its position. It might slip a little bit lower. That's called pelvic organ prolapse. So that population is more at risk for prolapse. And how do we negate that, or how do we avoid being in that complication? Somebody who's neutral, that's perfect. That would be ideal case scenario, but not all of us are in that stage. There's very few. There's a handful of people who can fall in that category. Most women, more than 70% women, hold excess tension in their pelvic floor. So it's a very huge population of women that have excessive tension in their pelvic floor. That leads to the usual round ligament pain, the pregnancy related back pain. They can't find a comfortable spot when they're sleeping, when they're turning. And then they end up having perineal tearing. So how do you avoid that situation? That's what we talk about in our birth prep class. And then postpartum, we evaluate how do you get your core back together. If you've had any abdomen separation, which is again very common, it's called diastasis recti. How do you rehab from that? How does your bladder sit? Are you getting those bladder urges in a normal way? Are you constipated? Is your gut behaving properly? Did you get hemorrhoids postpartum because of pushing? There's so much that gets covered in those prenatal postpartum visits. And usually that is that's kind of the foot in the door that gets people in there. And then they go through different stages, different ages and stages to rehab their pelvic floor, so that it takes them from that point on until their journey to menopause and beyond.
Now, the only thing that is coming to my mind is I have already delivered a child.
Yes.
And nobody told me. I
Right.
never knew there is pre-birth
Yes.
classes or something. I'm like, who are these wonderful, amazing women that think of themselves, prioritize, and do such amazing things?
I think that's just,
Did you do that?
I didn't. I
feel better.
Yes. And that is exactly what pushed me to get into this field. And that is why the journey, when I talk about pursuing pelvic health as a profession, that's why it's deeply personal. Me being a physiotherapist, me knowing anatomy, knowing the education that I have, if my journey looked like this, I can only imagine what someone who doesn't have the background, who doesn't have that information, what would their journey look like?
Yeah.
So it's important that we talk about these things and just make it relevant that this is available. We should be doing this. And now it's more common that family doctors, healthcare professionals, they actually refer people and say, in your maternity clinic, when you go to see your maternity doctor, one of the options in your obstetrician OB-GYN visit, one of the options is, do you want to go see a pelvic physiotherapist? It would be recommended if you do that before birth. It's also recommended after birth. So at least there's that conversation happening. But 10 years ago, 20 years ago, this was not a thing. This was definitely not a field that people knew about or people were even referring to.
Yeah, and especially in Canada, and I'm assuming most North American, like Western countries,
Right?
this is doable.
Yes.
What you said, like, deciding like with your body, your breathing pattern and stuff like that, you
Yes.
can decide which position you're giving birth to.
Right.
This is so easy to do.
Yes.
They asked me like so many questions. How do you
Right?
want to do this? Do you want music? This, that. I'm like, I have no clue. Just put me on the bed and get the baby
Yes.
out, right?
Yes.
This would be so helpful to know.
It would.
Like, my body is this structured and
Yes.
this is the best way for me to deliver.
Yes.
So it just
It would
feels
be
like so I've missed an opportunity.
Absolutely. Sometimes I reflect back, I think about it. Maybe another baby would have been worthwhile just for this. Now that I know, I would have rocked it this time.
Totally right.
Yeah.
But because these are muscles and these are holding your, all the pelvic organs,
Yeah.
does other factors affect? Like if you're too active, if you're walking a lot, and if your job is, on your feet all the time,
Yes.
or if you're sitting in the office, does these external factors affect?
Very much. Very much. In fact, our posture is the number one factor that affects it. Because when we imagine our pelvic floor, think of it as a base. It is pretty much the foundation on which our organ system is sitting. So if the foundation is those group of muscles, we have all of our organs sitting right on top of it. And then you have your core. Sometimes when we are sitting, we slouch ahead. We kind of sit right on our tailbone, or we slouch quite ahead, or we are rounding our backs and we're sitting. All of that puts pressure on the pelvic floor. There's not enough blood circulation that comes through, which forces the muscles of the pelvic floor to hold tension. And if we are constantly holding tension, then that puts us at a disadvantage. Then you end up having repercussions or symptoms which are relevant to that extra tension, excess tension. So people who have sedentary jobs, if they have jobs where they're at a desk 5, 6, 7, 8 hours in a day, one of the things that we always say is try to take movement breaks. Prolonged sitting or prolonged standing, both are bad. Any static position, for example, because the circulation of blood needs to happen so the muscles can contract and relax. And if that's not happening, then the muscle is not going to function effectively. So posture plays a huge role. The second role that, apart from posture, the second thing that also influences is how are our ribs stacked on the pelvis. Because when we think about breath, when we think about our rib cage, most of us we breathe without giving it a second thought. We're not taking those deep breaths unless you're in a yoga class and they tell take a deep inhale breath. Our normal functioning breath is very shallow. We're all shallow breathers. We breathe from the top of our chest, not from the base of the chest. So when that happens, it creates a piston-like force. It creates a steady state of force which has abdominal pressure created. And that abdominal pressure is what we are walking around throughout the day. So if we don't change our position, we're constantly in this pressure can situation, and we are sitting on that pressure can, just operating in that setup.
Right. Another thing you mentioned while talking about after delivery, postpartum,
right,
is the dissect.
Yes,
of
the
organs.
diastasis. Yes.
And that's why, I'm from India,
right,
born and raised there.
Right.
And I've seen every woman tying their stomach tight
Right.
with the cotton cloth. And nowadays there are belts available.
Right.
Does that help?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Initially, within the first 6 weeks, if that belly binding, we call it belly binding, if the belly binding is done, there is evidence now. There's a few research papers, and there is enough evidence to show that it allows the muscles to approximate or come back close together it doesn't necessarily tone the muscle. It doesn't necessarily strengthen the muscle, but physically, yes, those muscles do come back close together. So there is enough body of evidence to prove that, yes, it is a good practice. It is a beneficial practice. But just by doing that doesn't mean we can get rid of the loose excess skin
Right.
that is there postpartum. But yes, that does help for sure.
Because you're a physiotherapist, also, I would like to ask is how long do we need to wait after the postpartum
Yes.
before we could start exercising?
Right. Now, exercising means different things for different people. And that's why when this question is asked, it's a very common postpartum visit question.
Okay.
Every woman who comes in for their 6-week visit, that is a very common question that they ask. So my counter question to them is, what does being active or what does exercising mean for that individual? For some individuals, somebody who lives a pretty sedentary lifestyle, for them, it would mean, I just want to be fit enough that I can go up and down stairs. I can carry my baby. I can carry the stroller, push the stroller, and that should be fine. That's enough activity for me. For someone else, it might mean signing up for a marathon or getting back into their CrossFit class or doing a HIIT class or getting on their Peloton bike and going mountain climbing or whatever that means for them. So the extent of exercise varies based on what matters to that individual. And how we decide is based on two factors. The first factor is true physiological limits, which means truly how much time does tissue healing need for the body to recover, those tissues to recover, for the uterus, which was now expanded, for it to shrink back, go back into the pelvis cavity, for the bladder to come back to its normal situation. How long does that take? So that wait a minimum of that amount of time, which is not 6 weeks. The 6-week visit is not that. 6 weeks is only healing from cuts and tears. So if there was a perineal tear, if there was a C-section incision scar, for the skin to heal, it takes 6 weeks. That doesn't mean you're ready to exercise at 6 weeks. So the true amount of time that we recommend waiting for is at least 12 weeks or 3 months. For the first 3 months, just be active enough that you can do household activities. You can go for short walks, but no structured exercise or no heavy exercise. After 3 months, between 3 to 6 months, it is recommended that you return back to pre-pregnancy level of activity. And that pre-pregnancy is a very crucial word, because when we look at social media, when we look at expectations that a lot of postpartum moms have these days, society bombards them with bounce back, get back your mom body or get back your pre-pregnancy body, fit into those old genes. That might not be the healthiest route to take if you weren't an active individual before pregnancy. If you didn't do a HIIT class, if you didn't go to a marathon before pregnancy, don't expect to do that at 3 months postpartum. That's not the right approach.
Right. In Western culture, like we all who are living away from our homes and families, regular activities, doing regular activities is like a luxury.
Yes.
You have to get back to, doing some, especially if you're having second child.
Right.
You have to, I have seen so many women carrying a newborn baby to Walmart and superstores doing grocery. So I think that has become a norm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm mostly asking about doing regular exercises like yogas and everything that you see online. I see a lot of people, within 6 months, I'm back to this.
Yes.
Do these exercises at home to get tummy tuck, this, blah, blah, blah. So that is what I was trying to ask. But okay, between 3 to 6 months, you have to gauge your own body.
Exactly.
And everything.
And keep it gradual. I think the biggest recommendation is understanding that it has to be gradual. It is literally like you're training your body to go back to the gym. You're training your body for some higher level of activity, because you were deconditioned for 9 months. You did not have that level of activity, and now you're just ramping it up. So just taking it gradual under someone's guidance. It's best to either talk to a trainer or either talk to somebody who's qualified and who understands how do you return back, and then you can go on your own journey.
Before moving to the old age side of the issues, you also spoke about you deal with everything pelvic,
Yes.
including gut.
Right.
Now, if I were to have any issues related to gut or something, I would visit a doctor. That's
Right.
what like my mind
Sure. Yes.
tells me.
Yes.
Okay, it's gut, it's internal organ.
Right.
Talk to a doctor.
Right.
What role do you as a physiotherapist play here? When do I see you?
Love it. Love it. This is my favorite topic.
Yeah.
Pooping is my favorite topic to talk about.
See, honestly, after adulting, especially after 30,
Yes.
if you are clearing your bowels like a smooth, right?
You won the lottery.
Oh my
Yes.
god, that's the best day of your life. It's
Yes.
like nothing happens is fine, but
Yeah.
it helps you so much.
It does. It does. And a lot of our health markers, a lot of longevity markers depend on how good is your gut. What is the status of your gut health? So, gut health has so many more ramifications than just having, I mean, of course, it feels good. It is a good health marker. But other than that, it has a lot of implications.
It's your second brain.
It is. It truly is. Yes. So to answer that question, when someone has gut issues, what is the role of a physiotherapist? What do I gauge? So it all depends on what is the problem that the gut is having. The most common symptom that we notice here in Canada, in my practice, is there is an uptick in people having IBS type symptoms. IBS is the abbreviation for irritable bowel syndrome. So people range from being very constipated, where they might not be going to the bathroom every day. They have a bowel movement every second, third day. And even with that, there is some straining. It doesn't feel fully empty. And on the other side of the spectrum, they might go 5-6 times in a day and it's very soft, very runny. Both of those are problematic situations, and anywhere in between. So when we talk about gut issues, if it feels like your digestion isn't where it needs to be, that is a good enough reason to go see a pelvic physiotherapist, because there are many things that we can do when we evaluate, which would then alter how your gut behaves. So we are not changing the intestines. I'm not touching the intestine. I'm not doing anything to the organ itself. But what controls the smooth movement, or what controls the emptying effectiveness of that organ, is whether or not the gates open and close effectively. And those gates, that gate muscle, is in the pelvic floor. So if your pelvic floor is very tense, which is majority of the population, there are complications like constipation. And constipation doesn't necessarily mean not going to the bathroom. Someone who goes to the bathroom every single day can also have constipation if they don't feel fully empty, if they have to strain, if they have to push really hard to empty their bowel. That qualifies as constipation. If they have micro bleeds when they wipe or when they clean themselves, if they have micro tears or a little bit of bleeding every time they go to the bathroom, that does count as a pelvic floor dysfunction. And anywhere in between, it could be either straining to have a bowel movement, or you're uncontrolled in how your bowel empties. If you need to rush to the bathroom every time you get that urge, it would count as a pelvic floor dysfunction.
Okay.
And it can be remediated. The bottom line is it can be fixed.
Okay. So with physical exercises, it can be
Yes,
cured.
yes. Because there are certain movements that we can show our patients, which then give them the tools of, oh, when I'm feeling this way, if I do this particular technique, it feels better. Or if I'm constipated, a simple tip like putting a footstool under your feet and having a bowel movement, keeping your legs elevated, like a squat position,
Yeah.
that would make bowel emptying a lot easier. So then you don't get hemorrhoids, you're not straining. So there's many things that can be altered.
See, this thing makes me so upset. Is like India being like the smartest
Yes.
with everything. They had like Indian style toilets where you had to
Absolutely.
squat and sit.
Yes.
But all they had to do is go to the Westerners to follow the
Right?
seat. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Oh my God, why are you doing that to your body? Just follow your own culture.
Absolutely.
Even if like I am thinking if I were to build a custom house for myself, I would
Right.
put an Indian toilet there.
100%.
Why
Absolutely.
would you do this? Like, okay, it was meant for patients.
Right.
Like the Western kind of toilets.
No, even then, I would argue, even in that situation, even with patients, especially with patients, we don't want them to strain, because a Western toilet is designed for us to bear down and to have that straining effect. So, yeah, we were on the right track in squatting. Yes, yeah.
So much more.
Yes.
It's just the westernization happening in
Yeah.
India, and me watching from here upsets me so much. But it
Absolutely.
is what it is.
100%. And that's the cost of colonization, right?
Right.
That is the impact of what we had to endure. Now there's with I'm hoping with everything that the West throws at the East, just like yoga has been rebranded and everybody now thinks yoga is so
Yeah.
cool, but it originated in India.
Right.
Now I'm hoping that squatty
go back
potties,
to-
yeah, squatty potties become a thing, and they're like, oh, you should squat to have a bowel movement. Yeah.
Definitely. I hope to see this soon.
Yes.
Um, are there any myths, did like what I missed covering in the postpartum section, that you see a lot and you would want to, correct it for the audience?
Right. I think you covered a good chunk with pregnancy and those myths in and around pregnancy. The common ones with pregnancy were the ones where people believe if they don't have a vaginal birth, if they give birth through a C-section, then their pelvic floor is saved and they don't need to do anything about it. Kegels was another big one. Everybody doesn't need to do Kegels. That might not be the answer. One point that I would like to bust the myth on is around topic of pelvic pain.
Okay.
Because pelvic pain is underreported and often misdiagnosed. Only because a lot of women who have pelvic pain, women and men, but primarily when we are talking, the focus is on women, because majority of pelvic pain patients happen to be women. And because it's underreported and often dismissed when somebody says they have painful periods, it's usually dismissed saying, of course, periods are going to be painful. Take an Advil or take a painkiller and you'll be fine. Or if they say they have pain with intimacy, when they're having intercourse, if there's any discomfort or pain, usually it's often dismissed as a hush hush, where they say, okay, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's okay. You can just, suck it up a little bit. That's fine. Just live with it.
Right.
It gets better with time. It doesn't. And it needs to be talked about. We need to discuss this because these are important topics. These relate to important health concerns, which are now coming to the picture because more and more people are aware about it. There's more talk about it. So no amount of pelvic pain is normal. It might be common. There are many symptoms that are common when it comes to pelvic pain, but certainly not normal. So anyone who has excessively painful periods, lots of cramping, debilitating cramps that they have to take time off from work, can't go to school, can't go to college, and they're sitting at home, that is a concern. Talk to your doctor, because this is not okay. And certainly, maybe if they have access to a physio, go see a pelvic health specialist.
I used to have that
Okay.
before my pregnancy.
Okay.
But I used to just pop a pill.
Exactly. And the trend here, a few years ago now, it happens less often now, but people from my generation, when I see patients who are closer to our age, they always say the same thing. They say, yes, painkillers were very accessible. It was very common that the
My
doctor
doctor prescribed that to me.
would recommend take a painkiller, or here it's very common to put teenagers on birth control pills. They would recommend taking birth control pills to regulate their period, so that the extent of bleeding is controlled. None of those are fixes. None of those are options that one needs to just accept as a blanket statement. Again, like everything else, it needs a deeper evaluation.
Yeah. I think with anything to do with your body, what I have come to a point in my life where just taking medication is never an option.
Never the answer.
Because the problem is deep in the
Right.
roots. You
Yes.
need to fix that, and
Right.
you will never need like a medication or anything.
Absolutely.
So, okay, moving on to old age.
Right.
Do you think, like, most of the women, they don't have time for themselves, and they'll try to beat around the bush when
Right.
it comes to all bladder issues,
Right.
Like as you mentioned, not drinking water
Right.
while going out. They'll stop physical exercise, let's say skipping. If you're leaking, just stop doing that.
Right.
Things like that. Just make it work
Yes.
and just move ahead
Manage
in
it.
life.
Manage around it. Right.
But when it comes to old age,
Right.
maybe you didn't correct it now and then it gets worse. I've seen some women undergoing surgery
Right.
to fix it, or it just appears in your old age
Right.
out of nowhere, or menopause.
Yes.
Or no. So just share something about the old age part of it.
For sure, for sure. I think when we talk about old age, I'm going to define what we consider old age, because old age for someone might come when they feel old when they are in their 50s. For someone else, it might be in their 80s. Others, it might be when they're 45.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
old age is a very
I know.
broad umbrella term to talk about.
Definitely.
But I'll talk about the hormonal events, because it depends on those changes that happen. And in a woman's life, there are milestones where a lot of hormone shift happens. So puberty is one where your periods are starting. The next one is when your periods are starting to end, which is menopause. So if we have 1 year or 12 months when the person hasn't had any periods, officially we regard that as menopause. So after 1 year of no periods, you can safely say this person is in menopause, and any time after that is postmenopause.
Okay.
The average age of women who get menopause is in their 50s. So when you reach 50, 51, 52 is when usually globally all women slowly stop having their period. Given medical advancement, where we are at this day and age in 2025, medical technology has advanced to the point where 50 is midlife.
Yeah.
So this is not the end of life like it was considered a number of years ago. People from our parents' generation, for them, surviving till 60, 65 was their lifespan. Now 50 is midlife, so the average lifespan has improved, which means there is a big chunk of time women are spending without their periods.
Yeah.
And that quality of life needs to be affected. That is what matters. So there's a lot of talk about menopause now because women are living longer, because now at this stage they are concerned about what is the quality of life, how do we navigate these symptoms, how do we live with these symptoms if we are surviving for another 30, 40 years. How do we live like this? We don't want to accept this. So then there's that talk about it. But the changes of menopause come 10 years before menopause actually happens. So if somebody is having menopause at 50, 10 years before that, 5 to 10 years before that, so in their 40s, they start having these changes where their periods fluctuate, their hormones fluctuate, and that affects their pelvic floor. So when we talk about old age, now I'm going to redefine old age.
Yes.
This is when I'll say anybody who's over the age of 40 or in their 40s, they can start experiencing these things. The symptoms look very common and nobody correlates them to pelvic floor. One of the common symptoms is recurrent UTIs, urinary infections. So women start to go to their family doctor a lot often and say, yes, there's some burning when I'm going to the bathroom. Maybe give me an antibiotic. I think it's a UTI that I'm having. Or some skin changes like itching, irritation around the vaginal area. That needs maybe a cream or an ointment. But actually, this is the pH of their vulva changing. This is the hormonal impact that they are having. And because of fluctuating hormones, all of these changes feel and mimic a UTI, feel and mimic a yeast infection, but truly they might not be the case.
Right.
So when we think about the impacts of how hormone shifts affect the pelvic floor, the weakness in those muscles comes around that perimenopause stage because the level of estrogen is fluctuating. Estrogen and progesterone, those are two main female hormones, and they are necessary to support the muscles. So when we don't have those hormones, when the body slowly decreases producing it, people end up having laxity or looseness. Then they end up more with a risk of having prolapse. Previously, the remedy for prolapse used to just be a hysterectomy. Let's do an operation. Let's just take the uterus out. If the uterus doesn't sit in place, let's just remove that and take the uterus out of place. But then they soon started realizing when this was happening more often, oh, now the uterus is out, now the bladder is not in place, and we can't take the bladder out. We
Yeah,
need that for
yeah.
kidney function, we need that for normal function. So then they started to look at what else could be done, what is the picture there. So truly having a pelvic floor strength training program, or speaking to somebody who understands what would be applicable in that scenario, will help them improve their lifespan.
Okay. So, but like, when it comes to menopause, pre-menopause,
Yeah.
I'm not even looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But it sounds terrible, like so much your body is going through.
Right.
If you take care of yourself with taking care of
Right.
your pelvic floor, exercises, and everything
Lifestyle,
else,
right?
your
Yeah.
lifestyle,
Right.
you still have to go through all that, right?
You would.
Yeah.
So I think this is where I want to, I have to pick a bone with social media, because there has been demonizing of menopause and perimenopause. It is as simple and as easy as puberty. Now we don't regard puberty as a problem. When somebody says the person is going through adolescence, becoming a teenager, they're attaining puberty, boy or girl, getting their period, yes, that's a normal part of aging. That's a normal part of the transition of being a human. Similarly, menopause is a normal part of being a woman. If you had your period, yes, there is going to come a time when you will not have your period. I think the symptoms and the way social media describes it is, it makes it sound like it is a disease. It makes it sound like it is a problem, and it's not. It doesn't need to be. Yes, there are symptoms. Yes, there are changes that happen in the body, but they don't need to be diseases. They don't need to be problems. Once we know how to deal with it, once we know what to do about it, we ride through it, rather than causing fear, or maybe the fear mongering tactic, right? It
Right.
has to be packaged as a problem for the solution to sell.
Exactly, you're right. But when like if there are any women watching this who are in their 40s or 50s and going through bladder issues,
Right.
what they should just see a physiotherapist, or how can they take care of their pelvic health, even whatever on however bad their scenario is on the
Right.
scale of 1 to 10.
Right.
Why does it happen? Does it happen to everyone? And how do they take care of that?
Right.
And not let it fall so, like, get so worse
Yeah.
for it to then the last resort to be surgery.
To be surgery. True. I'll give you simple tips. There are some very simple tips and tactics. The first thing is to understand and listen to your own body, because as women we are experts at ignoring our symptoms. We are absolutely good at doing that. We might ignore some of the symptoms because they're not as bad as we think they are. And it's easy to carry on and move on with life. So the first tip is listen to your body, because you would feel something is off. You would know, okay, things are not in place. Something's off. It's not working the way it should. Whenever someone notices changes in their bladder habits, changes in their bowel habits or gut habits, and changes in their pelvic area. It could be the skin of the pelvic area. It could be the feeling, the sensation in the pelvic area, sensation of heaviness or pressure, or skin irritation or skin changes. Whenever any of these three things changes, listen to your body, observe it, and if you just keep track, if the symptoms or if whatever you're noticing, if that has been consistent for about a month, a few weeks, then yes, then go talk to someone. It doesn't necessarily need to be your family doctor. It could be a pelvic health specialist, or it could be your family doctor, absolutely, a nurse practitioner, or even your best friend. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Talk to somebody about it, because we have been conditioned to hide these symptoms, ignore them, and therefore a lot of people dismiss it. They just absolutely dismiss it.
Or also say, like, everyone goes through, oh, it happens to me as well.
Yes.
Wear what do you call diaper, adult
Exactly.
diapers.
Yes.
Just make it
manage
work.
it, make it work. Yes,
Exactly.
yeah. And that is the thing. We shouldn't take that. We shouldn't accept it. Just because it's common doesn't make it normal. It might be common. It is actually very common. 1 in 3 women have pelvic health dysfunction at some point in their lives. 1 out of 3 is a huge number.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have myself heard so many women say
Yes.
that, right? And when it comes to pelvic health, when you're in your 30s,
Yeah.
it could be related to pregnancy,
Right.
postpartum. And when it comes to your menopausal age, it is your bladder issues.
Yes.
These are the most commonly used terms or
Right.
issues women go through. But it's good to know that there are other things related to pelvic, like you mentioned. Women would think like UTI. They are
Yes.
having an UTI, but it's not that. It's your
not.
pelvic floor.
Yes.
So these are like good to know. Like,
Totally.
Yeah.
And there's a large variety. So when we look at the spectrum of the age range in which pelvic health symptoms might be obvious in someone's age, it could be somebody as young as maybe 8 years old. On the other end of the spectrum, the oldest patient that I've seen is 93. So anybody between the ages of 9 to
Right.
90
19, yeah.
could have their pelvic health symptoms. And it doesn't need to be just a bladder problem. It doesn't need to be just a pregnancy related thing. It could be anything which feels off. If it's in the pelvis and it feels different, it feels uncomfortable, then yes, it might be a pelvic health issue.
Right. I think I was listening to one of your videos on
Okay.
YouTube or something, and that's when it again, I learned something new where you mentioned like if you are having any irritation during an intercourse, maybe itching or pain or whatever,
Yes.
even that is pelvic health.
That is
Can
definitely.
you throw some light? Because again, you won't talk about
Yes.
it if you're going through
Yes.
something like this, because obviously who people are not comfortable.
Right.
And second, you would just go and buy over the counter medication for
Yes.
fungal infection or something.
Right.
Again, make it work. But it is so good to know that if you're going through something like this,
Right.
it is related to
It is very much related. And I think we as first of all as women who are from the South Asian descent, who are Indian or even Asian for that matter, we all grow up with a very conservative upbringing where these topics are not talked about at all or not discussed.
even with best friends.
Even with best friends, this is not a coffee table conversation. You won't bring
Exactly.
this up.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of shame around it. There's a lot of vulnerability associated with that, a lot of shame around the topic. And as I've been practicing these many years, I've realized that it's not just the South Asian or Indian population. There is a sizable number of people here even who would shy away from discussing that. But things are improving, things are changing. We're not perfect yet. There's more work to be done. But I think one of the most important topics to discuss when it comes to pelvic pain is pain with intimacy, pain with intercourse. Having pain with intercourse is one of the primary reasons that a lot of couples undergo secondary infertility. So we have a lot of professionals that we work alongside, fertility specialists, who refer their patients to the clinic because their blood reports are fine, their tests are fine, their hormone levels, the partner's semen analysis is fine. All of that is fine, yet they're not able to conceive. And this is the hidden truth. Nobody talks about this. When the couple tries to have intercourse, because of discomfort, they might not achieve penetration. They might actually not be able to penetrate. So that leads to infertility because it's secondary. It's not because there's something wrong with the mechanism, not because something's wrong with their hormones. Physically, it's just not happening. So that is a hidden thing that a lot of couples, unfortunately, they undergo. But the success rate of treating this is remarkable. There is a condition called vaginismus. Vaginismus means involuntary tightening of the muscles around the vagina. And vaginismus is one of the causes that leads to pain with intercourse. So when somebody tries to have intercourse, any insertion, and it doesn't need to be intercourse, it could be a medical exam. So when they go for ultrasounds, when they go for a doctor's checkup, a pap test,
Right.
that also is excruciatingly painful. Here in Canada, when girls insert a tampon, when they're first starting to get their periods and they're trying to insert a tampon, those are the first glimpses of vaginismus someone might see when they come into the clinic. So I have a lot of teenagers, 16, 18-year-olds who come in saying they haven't had intercourse, but they're having trouble inserting their tampon. And if we can address it at that young of an age, then yes, throughout life, they don't encounter the same difficulties as somebody with vaginismus might encounter later.
Right. This is good to know, because there is such less awareness.
Yes.
Because people don't talk about it.
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
I hope this video works as a resource and help all the women that are watching this and, take a
100%.
step for yourself
Yes.
and like look after yourself.
Absolutely, because it is so treatable. I think what keeps everybody fearful is feeling isolated. When you open up the conversation, one of the first responses that I've heard every single patient tell me is, "Oh, I thought it was just me. I thought I was the only person who has this problem." And then we show them the statistic. Then we say, "No, this is how common it is. 40% couples have that, and we are just not talking about it. We're not discussing this." And then we go through the journey of how quickly can we resolve this? What are the factors? How do we peel those layers and say, these are the tools, these are the strategies that you can use? And couples have, had children and they've been pain-free and now they don't fear intercourse. But to walk that path or to go through that journey, I think the first step is being courageous enough and opening that door of conversation, talking to somebody about it.
And how amazing to treat this with some exercises or doing some lifestyle changes
Yes.
rather than undergoing surgeries or eating pills.
Yes.
And,
Totally.
it is just such an amazing thing to let your body get back to where it is supposed to be.
Yes. Just let it heal. It knows what to do.
Exactly.
And you just, it's just those strategies, things that you can do to make that comfortable.
Right. Another thing that I did not know,
Yeah.
which surprised me, is men also have pelvic floor issues.
Yes.
Who knew? I didn't know men have pelvic floor.
Absolutely. Everybody who has a pelvis has a pelvic floor. So women and men, all of them, human beings have pelvic floors. All human beings have pelvic floors. And I think rather than women, of course, pelvic floor issues in women are less talked about, but even less talked about are symptoms in men.
Yeah.
Because men inherently are not seeking this information. And a lot of it is tied in with their self-image. A lot of these pelvic health issues are underreported because they don't know where to go. Who do they talk to? Family doctor is certainly not the person that they would be comfortable discussing this with. So yes, men do have pelvic floor issues, and they have the same pelvic floor issues that women have. They also have bladder leakage. They also have incomplete emptying of their urine or hesitancy. Sometimes they're not able to start urine as efficiently as it should. Sometimes they're not able to stop it when they need to. Or they might have pelvic pain. Men also have pelvic pain. And the quick and easy answer is to jump to a prostate exam and say, "Oh, if it is pelvic pain, it might be something to do with the prostate," which is true, but not all the time. Okay. Usually, their pelvic floor is the cause, and the most common complaint that men have with their pelvic floor is chronic constipation. Hemorrhoids and constipation is very, very rampant, and this has got everything to do with that tension in the pelvic floor.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Like, you being in this field for such a long time, what are some of the common symptoms that men see or they are challenged with?
Most commonly, it is constipation is a big one. Urine leakage is another one. And the third most common thing that they come with is erectile dysfunction. Okay. So all of these things have have to do with how effectively is their pelvic floor functioning. Is it flexible enough? Or is it too tight? When it's too tight, it doesn't evacuate, it doesn't empty properly, which is why they end up having hemorrhoids and constipation. If it's too tight, then they're not able to clamp properly. So there might be hesitation in starting urine or holding urine. And erectile dysfunction is also because their muscles don't have the adequate amount of blood circulation. So all of these impacts are seen in male population as well.
Okay, so if they are going through such things, they should
They
go to a
should,
physiotherapist.
yes.
But if someone, men or women, are not having any issues, can their pelvic floor be still affected without them realizing?
Yes, and most often it is. We usually take our pelvic floor for granted until it stops functioning effectively. Um, but certainly, yes, they, even though people are not in pain, they can have pelvic floor dysfunction. Usually, pain is not the first indicator of pelvic floor dysfunction. The most common thing that points towards pelvic floor dysfunction is when your habits start changing. So, keeping a track or just noticing your bladder and bowel habits will give you an indication of whether your pelvic floor is functioning optimally or not. So, staying within the norms, for example, not going excessively frequent with your bladder emptying, so not going more than 10 times in a day,
Yeah.
or not underperforming in the bladder. Same thing with the bowel, having a regular healthy gut routine where you're going at a certain time, typically certain times in the day. So if you're a morning person, emptying in the morning; if you're an evening person, emptying in the evening at regular intervals. And none of these scenarios have pain in the picture. None of these have pain involved. The other thing is when people start to notice bloating or abdominal discomfort, that could also point towards some tension in their pelvic floor. And one surprising fact, which catches everybody, is the connection between pelvic floor and other parts of the body, because pelvic floor is not something which is like a separate black box. It's not an isolated part of the body. It affects all other systems in our body. For example, when we look at when we were talking about the external methods of how does one evaluate whether someone would have more tension, less tension, a common trick that we use as physios is checking jaw tension. Because when people clench their jaw, if they have a mouth guard or if they have tension in their jaw muscles and their neck muscles, it's almost certain that they would have excessive tension in their pelvic floor. Similarly, if they have a lot of tension in their foot muscles, in the arch of their foot, if they have plantar fasciitis or tight foot muscles and they constantly keep getting achy feet or trouble with their feet, chances are that they would have tighter pelvic muscles or more tension in the pelvic muscles, because it's the same nerve that connects. The neuromuscular connection in the pelvic floor, jaw, and foot is exactly the same. It's along the same line. So when the middle part gets affected, we know that either the top or the bottom are also affected.
This is good to know. Yeah, your body functions in such a
Everything is
amazing way.
connected. It's one
Exactly,
unit.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
But are there any exercises you can give to the viewers that they can practice on the daily basis to just, for their pelvic health, to
Yes.
maintain their pelvic health?
For sure, for sure. I think the biggest and the most important thing, if there's one tip that I can give to the viewers, is to learn to breathe effectively. Because when we understand how we take a deep breath or how are we breathing on a day-to-day life, it makes a huge difference in the resting tension in the pelvic muscles. Because a lot of problems happen when we hold pelvic tension, if we can learn or teach ourselves to keep the pelvic floor flexible, most of these symptoms would get corrected. And the quickest way to do that is by affecting our breath, by affecting how slow we inhale, how slow we exhale. So when we look at breathing, it doesn't need to be complex. It doesn't need to be you don't need to sit down and meditate. You're not in a yoga session. It's something as simple as keeping your hands just comfortably resting and supported, taking a deep breath and inhaling at least for 5 seconds. So you're taking a deep breath where you're not caving your abdomen. You're not going like this. You're not inhaling just from the top. So allowing your rib cage to expand like an umbrella where it goes 360 degrees, not just at the top going up and down, and ensuring that it lets 5 seconds of inhalation to happen. And when you exhale, exhaling through your mouth, where you're just doing a slow exhale out, maybe between 6 and 7 seconds. So exhaling a little bit longer than the inhale. If we start practicing that for 2 minutes, 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the evening, that gets rid of 70% symptoms. That is a big, huge way of how you can affect your pelvic floor and how you can keep it healthy. The other tip I would give is keep your functions regular, bladder and bowel functions regular. Regular means whatever is normal for them. So drinking your 3 liters of water, having a healthier lifestyle where you're eating healthy, eating mostly whole foods, and keeping a good healthy fiber content. So your gut stays regular, because when it stays regular, you're forcing your muscles to open and close. You're forcing them to be flexible, and then they can function effectively.
Yeah. In today's day and age, when it gets so busy, I sometimes, jokingly tell that thank God, like breathing is on autopilot.
Yes.
Otherwise, I would even forget how to breathe
Right?
or when to breathe.
Yes.
Because it's just so crazy. But yeah, it's like you have to, when you are into living good or into habit building, habit stacking is what I got to
Yes.
know. So what I have started doing is, when my son, like he's 5 years old, when he really tests my patience,
Okay.
and like I have to scream out loud,
Right.
and he knows he's made me mad.
Yes.
Instead of yelling, I'll just do like, and he understands, like, why are you doing that? Are you mad? What's going on? So he
Yes,
knows instead
that's
of yelling,
perfect. Yes.
she's doing something and she's mad.
Right?
It will even scare him more that she is trying to,
Yes. Right?
stay
Calm it
calm.
down. Yeah.
So, yeah, you should do something like that
Yes.
to induce like good habits in your daily routine.
Just little things that you can
Exactly.
incorporate in your daily routine. It doesn't need to be a separate time. It doesn't need to be something that you just do as an exercise.
Right.
It could just be incorporated in your day-to-day living. And that is one of the most important principles that we use, especially as physios, given how busy everyone is, for compliance, for our patients to be compliant with the instructions that we are giving. My rule is it has to be mom-proof. So if I'm treating a mom and she has kids and she runs the busy life, it has to be mom proof, meaning she doesn't need extra things on her plate.
Right.
You already have enough going on in your life. So it has to fit in somewhere into your routine where you don't have to have a separate time. You don't have to take time off to do that.
Right. And especially, like, I would urge all the women, especially watching this, who are in Canada, like, we are mostly covered with our health cares.
Right.
So you should take an appointment and meet a physiotherapist just to keep in check.
Yes, just get an
It's
evaluation.
all covered. Why wouldn't you do that?
Absolutely. So I think the advantage is when people have health benefits. Most workplaces have extended health benefits. So if they have extended health benefits and they have coverage for physiotherapy, this counts as physiotherapy. So you can just have an evaluation done. So you understand what's your baseline. Where do you stand?
Exactly.
And then if something needs to be changed, then you can change it sooner rather than waiting for other symptoms to show up.
Right.
Yeah.
And I totally forgot, but you have your own clinic here in Calgary. Can you
practice.
give some details?
Yes.
Where is it located?
I practice at 2 locations. One of them is at Lakeview Physiotherapy. That is in the southwest of Calgary at the intersection of Glenmore and Crowchild. And my other practice location is at the South Health Maternity Clinic. So it's in combination with the labor and delivery doctors who deliver at the South Health campus. So I'm in the clinic with them alongside. So those are my prenatal, postnatal patients that I see. So both of these locations, people can find me at either of these locations, and happy to help. Yeah.
Right. I'll add your address and contact details in the video. First, I am booking an appointment with you, because before giving, lectures to other, I should first do it myself. So your first
Absolutely.
appointment is with me, myself. But yeah, even for others, She is so amazing. Like, I loved this conversations. There's so much to learn from this.
I'm so grateful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's nice to have these discussions, to have these conversations, because it's like Pandora's box. You start one thing and one thing leads to another, and we'd all be surprised when you have this conversation with your friends. I urge everyone, whenever someone comes to see me, I always urge and say, go to your friend and tell them that you saw a pelvic physiotherapist. They're going to ask you, what did you do there? What happens? And then they'll start to ask more questions. One thing leads to another, and you'd be surprised to see how common these symptoms are, but we're not discussing them enough.
Exactly. And just another question. Do you think like treating this early in the age rather than, getting there to menopause and then going is advisable? You are
It will
better
help. Yes.
off
Yeah,
doing
sooner
it
is better.
sooner is better, right?
Certainly, because when we are younger, when we have the advantage of having certain hormones, younger population has the benefit that they have better neuromuscular control. They understand, our brain is more adaptable, so it's easier to train when we are younger, and we have the advantage of having our hormones in place where they need to be.
If I book an appointment with you, what can I expect in my first visit?
Right. So typically, our initial assessment, the first appointment, tends to be 1 hour long, so 60 minutes. In the first setting, we go through a detailed evaluation. So there's going to be a lot of question answer that we'll be doing. Majority of the part is me trying to understand your specific health situation, because everyone's health situations are different. The habits that we have, they are different. So I'll ask you about your symptoms, get a detailed history of what is the symptom that's most bothersome, how long has it been, so asking questions regarding that. And then we move on to a gynecological exam, a gynecological history. So things about period, things about when was the first period, how regular are they, all of those kinds of questions. Have you had a UTI, or have you been taking any medication specifically for it? Because certain medications also influence how our gut behaves. Medications influence how our bladder behaves. So it's important to know the role of how these things interact. Then looking at activity and lifestyle, because if it's an individual who is on their feet, walks, lifts, and is mobile, for them the evaluation looks very different than somebody who's spending their day at a desk, in a desk job, and is mostly sitting. So activity levels, lifestyle questions, all of those are important. And if it is an individual who's given birth, questions about childbirth, if they've been through labor, how was delivery, those complications. And then certainly about intercourse, if they're sexually active, what kind of troubles do they have, if there is any problem with intercourse. And then finally coming to bladder and bowel habits, detailed history of their bladder habits, their bowel routine, what happens, fluid intake, their diet, all of that goes in the question answer part. After that, we do a physical exam, and that is very similar to a gynecologist exam. So I always say, prepare for an internal exam, because I will want to see those muscles. It wouldn't be an effective evaluation if I'm not seeing those muscles. So it will be a gynecological exam, but I can guarantee that it wouldn't be painful, because that's the biggest thing that most people hesitate with. It would be an internal exam, but not a painful exam. And then physical parts of the evaluation, the external evaluation, checking for lower back, checking hip, their jaw and their feet,
Right.
other parts of the body, because everything's connected, and that's what takes up the full hour. Once that evaluation is done, then we come up with a customized treatment of what would be relevant for that person. Would they need more strengthening? Would they need more stretching, flexibility? Or do they simply need to understand the connection with their pelvic floor? Because not everybody is aware of how do you use the pelvic floor, or are you even in tune with what those muscles are and where are they located? So it's a very individualistic approach.
Right. And I feel because we are so living alone here, and women have to take most of the burden with, bringing their kids up, work, and everything. And you're going to live a long life.
Yes.
Giving the average Canadian life.
Right.
So you should take
You
care
should
of
take care
yourself.
of
That is the
yourself.
most, that is what I think.
Right.
Like, I'm going to live such a long life.
Yes.
At least that's what the
Right.
Canadian
Make it
average
good.
life.
Yeah.
I would want to live it as smooth and
Yeah.
not with doctor visits as often.
Yes.
That's what my goal is. So you should take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself. Yes.
I don't do that. I'm just saying it. I'm going to try harder. But
Right?
that's, yeah.
A step in the right direction, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it was amazing chatting with you.
Thank you.
And this was such an informational, hour because I got to learn so many things and
Right.
it's amazing. Is there anything I missed? Last thoughts?
No, I think you were fantastic in touching all of those pointers from, like I said, from puberty to menopause, every age and stage in life. The only passing thought that I would leave all your viewers with is think about all of your symptoms and to understand and be aware that just because your symptoms are very common, and even if your friends have it, if you notice that it's a common part of transitioning through life, common doesn't necessarily mean normal.
Yeah.
And seek help when it's early rather than waiting for things to go bad. There are treatment interventions, there are specialists who are specifically trained for this. And usually, most of these things are easily reversible. So rather than accepting a substandard life, improve the quality of your life. Yeah.
Definitely. And that's such a powerful thought to end this episode with. I want to thank you again for doing this. And I'm sure it is going to inspire a lot of women to take their first step towards their
I hope
physical
so.
health and pelvic health. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And if you found value in this and if you loved this episode, don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you with some amazing episodes again. Until next time.